Tonight, the concern for children as the U.S. nears an all-time high of COVID-19 cases. Child COVID hospital admissions jumping more than 50% in 4 weeks. The major decision by the nation's largest school district before students return from holiday break. Every U.S. state now listed in the CDC's red zone of high transmission. The surge also crippling the sports world, the new COVID records set by the NFL, and the College Bowl games now canceled. Also tonight, extreme weather across the country. The record snowfall in the west, Seattle's airport seeing the most delays and cancellations in the world. But in the south, temperatures are soaring, and the area is still reeling from that deadly tornado outbreak, now bracing for another round of severe storms. We have the timing and the track. Deadly shooting spree, the chilling surveillance video showing a man walking into a tattoo shop in Colorado before opening fire. The shop's owner, just one of several victims across multiple crime scenes. What her father told Top Story tonight as we learn more about the suspect. Plus, the manhunt intensifying for a hit-and-run driver who plowed through a group of children. At least 2 killed and 4 others injured. The pleas from police tonight. Deadly plane crash, a home security camera capturing the moment a small plane went down in San Diego. Federal investigators now on the scene. And blast from the past, a second time capsule found where a Confederate statue once stood and opened 134 years later. The pieces of history discovered inside. Top Story starts right now. And good evening, everybody. I'm Aaron Gilchrist in tonight for Tom Llamas. We begin Top Story with an alarming trend as the number of U.S. COVID-19 cases surges toward a record high. New analysis from NBC News showing the number of children hospitalized with COVID-19 has jumped 52% since the first week of December. That rate rising nearly twice as fast as the rate of adults. Schools now scrambling to come up with plans to keep students safe as they return from winter break. New York City, the largest school district in the nation, bringing kids back into the classroom, but sending out millions of at-home tests. The CDC says every state is now seeing a high rate of COVID-19 transmission, the surge impacting everything from travel to sports and New Year's Eve celebrations. And there is still some confusion over updated quarantine guidelines. A lot to get to tonight. We start with Sam Brock, who leads us off from Miami.
With the Christmas holiday pouring kerosene on a COVID fire already blazing, some of the nation's biggest school districts are getting aggressive about protecting students starting in the new year. With New York City leading the charge, ending full classroom quarantines on January 3rd and ramping up at-home testing.
2 clear messages we're saying loud and clear. Your children are safer in school. The numbers speak for themselves.
The plan in New York City includes funneling some 2 million testing kits to schools, 2 per student when a classmate is infected. School districts in Chicago to San Diego also passing out those hard-to-find tests in hopes of keeping more kids in the classroom. Testing a critical component, as more than 80% of 5 to 11-year-olds have yet to get vaccinated.
I believe kids need to develop immunities to the flu, to COVID, to different variants. I'm vaccinated, but I'm just not comfortable vaccinating my child.
Childhood infections now soaring, up 50% since the first week of December. Despite cases increasing nationwide, officials adjusting guidelines for those infected. The CDC says if no symptoms persist 5 days after testing positive, the person no longer needs to quarantine, but should still wear a mask for 5 additional days in public spaces.
As you have more and more symptoms, you actually shed less and less virus. So if you're asymptomatic, meaning no symptoms, you probably are shedding a trivial amount of virus, if at all, at that point.
Despite Omicron symptoms appearing milder than Delta's, beleaguered frontline and healthcare workers are still getting hit particularly hard.
Do you have the staff to handle this surge?
Not at this time, because unlike before, our staff was not as easily infected like now. We have more staff now that is being infected.
Alex Zaharsky is the nurse manager at Jackson Memorial's medical ICU, where the healthcare system has witnessed a massive jump in cases.
In 1 week, you've seen a 150% increase in COVID patients.
That's correct.
Does that make you nervous?
Very much so, because the numbers have been rapidly increasing and have exponential increase.
That infection spreading in ways affecting all aspects of life, including on sports' biggest stages. Monday, the NFL recording a single-day record of 106 COVID infections and now mandating boosters for the media ahead of the playoffs and Super Bowl. And this week's college bowl games jeopardized on a daily basis. Late tonight, the UCLA Bruins pulling out of the Holiday Bowl just hours before kickoff.
And Sam Brock joins us now from Miami and the Hard Rock Stadium, the site of the Orange Bowl this year. Sam, how are the teams approaching this Friday's game?
The Michigan and Georgia players, Aaron, describe it as a business trip. They are being extra careful, wearing their masks inside, only really spending time with teammates because the college football semifinals is 3 days away at this stadium right here. And if they have a COVID outbreak, either team, they would have to forfeit the game, Aaron.
And Sam, there's also a new warning out about rapid testing and how effective it is with Omicron, right?
That comes from the FDA. That is new tonight. The FDA warning people right now that those rapid antigen tests might not be as accurate at detecting Omicron, largely because of all of the mutations involved with this variant. So they say if you test negative, but you're still experiencing symptoms, you should go, Aaron, and get a PCR test as well.
Sam Brock in Miami tonight. Sam, thank you. We want to take a closer look now at that alarming rise in COVID among children. Pediatric hospital admissions quadrupling from New York to Texas now. And tonight, what doctors on the front line say is driving that surge and what parents can do to keep their kids healthy. Here's NBC's Gary Grumbach.
Before the doors opened at this clinic in southeast Washington, D.C., hundreds were already in line to get tested.
It's been extremely hard. I mean, lines have been wrapped around the corners.
Dondrea Hill says she arrived an hour before, hoping to secure a PCR test. Her daughter and granddaughter tested positive last week. Now she and another grandchild have been exposed.
They got it from school. I just don't think that they have the proper system in place. I mean, I know they can't watch every child, but it's dangerous for our children, I think.
Now all she can do is wait for a result.
I'm just sick of COVID.
You're just tired of all of this?
Sick of COVID, yes.
The hours-long testing lines we're seeing here are similar to what we're seeing across the district and around the country, and it's people of all ages. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser is responding by opening up more PCR testing sites and ordering 1 million rapid tests, but they won't be here until January. But some worry the threat is already here, as the highly contagious Omicron variant spreads at an alarming rate. In the last 5 days, D.C. has reported more than 11,000 positive cases of coronavirus, more than the city has ever seen.
My brother was around somebody that had a COVID, and I just want to be, and I had some symptoms, so I want to make sure I don't have it.
The variant now targeting the vulnerable, hospitalizations ticking up in some areas, largely among the unvaccinated and the young. Nearly 2,000 kids have been hospitalized nationwide in the last 4 weeks, rising at a rate nearly twice as fast as adult hospitalizations. In New York City, pediatric hospitalizations have increased nearly fivefold since the start of December. Approximately half of those admitted are children under the age of 5. The state's health commissioner sounding the alarm.
Many people continue to think that children don't become infected with COVID. This is not true. Children become infected and some will be hospitalized. The immunization coverage in this group, the vaccination coverage, remains too low.
In New York, just over 16% of the children who are eligible, ages 5 to 11, have received the vaccine. And at Texas Children's Hospital, unvaccinated children in that age group filling beds. The number of COVID patients quadrupling in just the past week.
I think the majority of them that are admitted are kids that are in respiratory distress. You know, they need oxygen or they may need assistance with breathing, just like our adult patients do.
Dr. Stanley Spinner urging families to wear their masks, avoid large crowds, and most importantly,
the absolute most important thing, and I would tell parents, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5 down the list, is get your kids vaccinated.
And Gary joins us now from a testing site in Washington, D.C. Gary, as you reported, health officials are concerned about these cases among children, but there's also growing concern about another issue, that the number of infections could actually be much higher than reported.
Yeah, that's right, Aaron. Well, there's a line of people waiting in a PCR testing line behind me. The increase in popularity of rapid at-home tests has also been taking place, but many states don't have the reporting capabilities to be able to receive these positive cases, leading to what is likely a massive undercount in already high case numbers. Aaron?
Gary Grumbach in Washington tonight. The Omicron surge also working its way through Europe. Several countries planning new restrictions and lockdowns. The surge also now affecting New Year's plans as gatherings are limited or canceled. NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter has more.
Tonight, across Europe, new lockdowns and restrictions as Omicron continues its dominance. France looking ahead to New Year's Eve, Paris canceling the city's famous fireworks display. The government now limiting large gatherings and making it mandatory to work from home starting early January. The French Prime Minister saying gatherings and events will be limited to 2,000 people indoors and 5,000 people outdoors. And no more standing concerts. And you must now be seated in a cafe or bar to be served. Like many of its European neighbors, over the weekend, France breaking its record case count with more than 100,000 new infections on Christmas Day. Meanwhile, in parts of Germany, gyms, swimming pools, nightclubs, and cinema all closed. Social gatherings limited to 10 fully vaccinated people. But not everyone's happy. A protest breaking out in eastern Germany. According to local reports, 100 people were arrested and 10 police officers injured. In Greece, starting January 3rd, bars and restaurants will be required to close by midnight. And in Denmark, which now boasts the world's highest infection rate, bars and restaurants forced to limit their hours. Museums and cultural attractions are shuttered. But here in the UK, as daily cases continue to shatter records, the health secretary ruling out any new restrictions before the new year.
When we get into the new year, of course, we will see then whether we do need to take any further measures, but nothing more until then, at least.
Health experts point to the early evidence that when compared to Delta, Omicron is far less likely to put you in the hospital. The problem for the UK, like in the US, is healthcare workers are becoming sick too, which means it will take far fewer cases to overwhelm the NHS. Molly Hunter, NBC News, London.
Now let's bring in NBC News senior medical correspondent Dr. John Torres to talk a little bit more about what's been going on here. And Dr. John, I've been thinking about this new guidance from the CDC around quarantine, and I can't help but wonder if we're sort of reaching the end of the pandemic. If not in words, then in actions. Is the public health apparatus sort of saying, without actually saying, that we're done trying to stop infections? We just want to keep people out of the hospitals now. So open your businesses, go back to your offices. Expect that you're going to have cases and just deal with it.
And Aaron, I think it's even one step beyond that, because I think they actually have said that we have to learn how to live with this virus right now. We're getting to that point where the virus is not going to go away. And so now the hard part is trying to figure out what we need to do in order to live with this virus. And I think that's what you're seeing here. Last week, if you remember, they dropped the quarantine time period from 10 to 7 days for healthcare workers. And then this week they said, well, let's make it 5 days for everybody. If you're fully vaccinated, you don't have to quarantine if you had an exposure. But anybody, whether you have a vaccine or not, if you test positive, then you need to only do it for 5 days, and then 5 days of wearing a mask beyond that. And I think what you're seeing here is that turn, both like you mentioned, both in what they're using to talk about the pandemic and how they're looking at the actions they're taking going forward. One component we're still missing is that testing component, which some of the reporters have talked about, but I think that's going to be added on in January, so hopefully we get some clearance on that as well.
Well, let me ask you another point about that. I mean, there's some confusion, it seems, with the new CDC guidance about not having a negative rapid test after that 5th day in quarantine. That used to be sort of an insurance policy that you weren't going to spread COVID when you came out of quarantine. What do you make of a negative test not being a part of the guidance?
And, that's one thing I think that myself and a lot of experts are kind of scratching their heads a little bit, saying, how did we not put that into the guidelines? If you look at the UK, they dropped theirs from 10 to 7 days, but day 6 and day 7, you have to have a negative at-home test. Here, we did not incorporate tests. If you look at the guidelines, they say think about getting a test on day 5, but that's not part of the criteria for leaving your house. Part of the reason is because the testing in the UK, it's readily available. You can go to COVID centers, you can go to vaccination centers, you can go to pharmacies. It's readily available. Here, it's not. People talk about not being able to find it. And until we can get it more available, I think the CDC said, let's go ahead and try and do this. And hopefully cases don't go up too much, because we want to get businesses open. We want to get things moving again. At the same time, we want to try and keep people healthy. That test would add that one more layer of protection there. And hopefully that comes in the next couple of weeks.
Let's talk a little bit about kids and COVID. There's an NBC News analysis that this is of HHS data that found that pediatric hospitalizations jumped 52% in the last 4 weeks. In comparison, adult hospitalizations are up 29%. When you look at that information, how concerned do you think parents should be about their kids ending up in the hospital?
Yeah, I think parents should be concerned for a couple reasons. Number one, this is the winter, and this is typically when kids start getting those respiratory illnesses, RSV being one of them, COVID now being another one, the flu. They end up in the hospital because of that. And what we do know is that some states and some regions are seeing increase in COVID cases, putting kids in the hospital and putting them on oxygen. In other states, we see that where kids are getting tested because they're going to the hospital for a variety of reasons, not COVID, but are getting tested positive for COVID, even though they're not on oxygen, they're not in the ICU or on ventilators. But at the same time, the concern is as these numbers creep up in cases, children will start having more and more issues. Those are the ones we need to protect. The best way to protect them is for the rest of us to get our vaccines, Aaron.
All right, Dr. John Torres, the same advice we've been hearing for a long time now. Get vaccinated, get boosted. Thank you, sir. COVID is also having an impact on travel. We know that thousands of flights canceled because of airline employees becoming infected. Severe storms also adding a second punch to those travel headaches, with extreme weather impacting millions from coast to coast. Steve Patterson now with the latest on both fronts.
Tonight, a travel nightmare forecasted for thousands of Americans making the long journey home. More than 1,000 flights canceled just today.
We've been in an airport since about 7:30 this morning.
In Seattle, snow and frigid temperatures putting the airport at the top of an unenviable list, the most delays and cancellations in the world.
We're actually on the plane
at the gate
for 2.5 hours.
In Northern California, a 51-year December Sierra snowfall record shattered. Thousands left without power, major highways still shut down, causing massive traffic jams as officials scramble to clear the roads. Residents trying their best to shovel out.
It's rough because when you come home to this many feet of snow, it's days and days of digging out.
Authorities there on a desperate search for 43-year-old skier Rory Angelata, missing since Christmas. His family praying.
I do have hope, but it's definitely going to be a miracle.
Meanwhile, the South is seeing soaring temperatures. Forecasters say at least 70 daily record highs could be set by the end of the week.
This is like a gift from the heavens after the freeze last year.
And this week, officials worried about even more damage. Heavy rain and thunderstorms predicted to hit the same region where just 3 weeks ago, a historic tornado outbreak took more than 90 lives. From record highs in the South to now record sub-below zero wind chills in the Midwest to now record snowfall totals here out west, and much of it now wreaking havoc for travelers both on the roads and the skies.
Let's bring in NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman now, who's tracking all of it for us. Michelle, a lot of interesting weather, severe weather still to come.
That's right. Hi there, Aaron. Great to see you. Yeah, we have a lot of weather tomorrow, winter weather and then summer-like weather. So let's first start with the winter alerts coast to coast, because we're still seeing a ton of winter alerts in the west. And then as we go through the upper Midwest and northern plains into the Northeast, we are looking at some snow in parts of 20 states under winter alerts tomorrow. So this is a setup in the west. We continue to see that snow faucet pouring, and we're going to see that tomorrow, the heaviest snow across central and southern Sierras. And then we're looking at torrential rainfall, LA to San Diego. We could see some flash flooding there, especially in the burned areas. Now we have the wind, we have the snow, we have the rain in the west, and we're going to add on some dangerously cold air. So we could see wind chills as low as -50. So daytime highs in the single digits, the teens, dangerously cold there. That's a story we're going to continue to watch. On the flip side, as we head to the south and east, it feels like October. We're looking at temperatures in the 70s and 80s. So by tomorrow in Houston, 82 degrees. We could break a record there. 72 in Memphis, Nashville, 70 degrees, and Atlanta, 73. It stays in place on Thursday and actually through the weekend. But by Thursday, we're looking at 73 in Atlanta, 76 in Galveston, 77 degrees in Tallahassee. So this is the setup here. We have those warm temperatures. That's the fuel. And then we have a cold front that's going to move through. That's almost like the match. That's going to spark some severe storms. So we're looking at 11 million at risk into tomorrow night, where we could see winds gusting to 60 miles per hour, damaging hail, and also a few tornadoes. That's what we're going to be watching through tomorrow night. That threat will stay with us through Thursday and also through Friday. Rainfall will be a problem, too. We could see some localized flooding with total inches up to 3 inches, and that's going to be in some spots that saw those early December tornadoes. So as we head towards New Year's Eve, we're looking at kind of the same pattern on Friday. Rain and storms for the Ohio Valley, the Tennessee Valley, the Mississippi Valley, heavy snow to the west. that frostbite risk as we head towards the northern parts of the country. And then by midnight, ushering in 2022, those strong storms remain in the Tennessee Valley with the snow in parts of the Rockies. Aaron?
Michelle, thank you. Turning now to that deadly shooting spree in Colorado, 6 people dead, including the alleged gunman. Family members of the victims are speaking out about the loved ones they lost. Also tonight, surveillance video emerging that appears to show the suspect as he was carrying out those attacks. Local police pushing ahead with a large-scale investigation into the killer's motives now. NBC News correspondent Maura Barrett has the latest.
Tonight, 5 killed and several injured, but the motive a mystery in what Denver police are calling a killing spree.
This is the holiday season. To have this type of spree take place is not normal for our community.
This chilling new surveillance video given to NBC from a neighboring business in Lakewood, appearing to show the alleged gunman at one of several locations where shots were fired Monday night. Here, he's walking into a tattoo shop, appearing to carry a gun. Less than 10 seconds later, he casually walks out and drives away in a van, appearing to turn down the street against traffic. It all started earlier Monday evening. Gunfire exchanged in at least 7 separate locations across Denver and in the nearby Lakewood suburb. Police say they initially responded to an active shooter in Denver, a memorial forming at Soul Tribe Tattoo Shop, where the owner, Alicia Cardenas, was shot and killed. A heartbroken father paying tribute to his daughter.
It's difficult to really express how many people's lives she touched. She was a very outgoing person. She accepted everybody, and everybody, was connected with her somewhere or another.
After the initial shootings, police tried to take the gunman into custody.
There was an exchange of gunfire. We believe that the individual, after disabling the police car, fled into Lakewood.
There, police say the suspect shot and killed another person before Lakewood police identified his vehicle, and he opened fire on police officers.
The driver was able to get away. The driver then fled on foot in the area behind us in the Belmar shopping area, where he allegedly felony menaced another business with a firearm.
We were just inside the store and heard one gunshot and then a whole array, and it sounded like they hit the side of the building.
Once Lakewood police intercepted him for the second time, authorities say he again fired at officers, shooting and injuring one of them.
It's a tough day for the Lakewood police family. Obviously, when this happens to one of our own.
The shooter ultimately taken down and pronounced dead at the scene. Police now identifying the shooter as Lyndon James McLeod, conducting a large-scale investigation determined to understand his motive.
It's scary that this is what goes on nowadays. It's not an uncommon event for there to be public shootings. It's sad. It's scary.
Maura joins us now. Maura, we're getting some new details about both the shooter and some of the victims. What have you learned?
Well, Aaron, in addition to the shooter's identity, we now also know that he was on the radar of police. There were 2 past investigations, one earlier this year, the other last year, but they didn't result in any charges at the time. And we also know that it appears, police say, that these victims were targeted. They had personal or professional relationships with the shooter, but we still do not know a firm motive. Now, in terms of the victims, we do know now that 6 in total were killed, and we have the identity of 2 of them. Danny Schofield and Sarah Steck in Lakewood. The other victims are waiting to get the release information from the Denver medical examiner. And as for that police officer that was injured, she is resting after surgery. She might need more surgeries, but she's expected to make a full recovery. Aaron.
Maura Barrett for us tonight. Maura, thank you. In Los Angeles, the family of the 14-year-old girl killed by a stray police bullet speaking out for the first time and calling for justice. That girl was killed when a police officer opened fire on a man attacking another customer. A note to our viewers, you may find some of this footage disturbing. Here's NBC's Emily Ikeda.
Valentina, life matters!
A growing outcry for justice.
Never should this 14-year-old little girl ended up as collateral damage.
After a 14-year-old was inadvertently shot and killed by police who were pursuing an assault suspect at a North Hollywood store. Valentina Orellana Peralta died in her mother's arms while dress shopping just 2 days before Christmas.
Hija mía, te amo.
Heartbroken parents mourning their loss.
Tenía grandes sueños.
The Los Angeles Police Department releasing body cam and store security video this week, revealing the tense moments before the shooting.
He's breaking things. He's breaking things.
The suspect, with a bike and heavy-duty cable lock, seen acting strangely inside a Burlington store last week before attacking several women. A frantic evacuation.
Evacuate the building.
911 calls capturing the chaos and conflicting reports of what weapon the man was carrying. One victim brutally beaten, a trail of blood leading police officers to her.
Victim down! Victim down!
As they moved in, repeated calls among the force to slow down. And then 3 shots. An officer striking the suspect, 24-year-old Daniel Elena Lopez. But police say one of the bullets ricocheted off the ground and pierced a wall.
Unbeknownst to the officers, a 14-year-old girl was in the changing room behind a wall.
The tragedy calling police tactics into question.
These officers that went inside the Burlington Coat Factory were faced with what we call some of the characteristics of a crisis, which are uncertainty. They're making decisions based on confusing, ambiguous, and sometimes even conflicting information.
Emily joins us now from North Hollywood, outside that store where that tragic shooting happened. Emily, what are the next steps in this case?
Hey there, Aaron. Well, a multi-agency investigation is underway, and authorities say it will take months to complete. In the meantime, the police officer who fired the fatal shots has been placed on administrative leave. Aaron.
Emily Ikeda in Los Angeles tonight, and still ahead this evening, a deadly plane crash. A small plane going down in a San Diego neighborhood. What we're learning from federal investigators on the ground. Plus, port explosion, dramatic new images from Syria after Israeli airstrikes for a second time this month. And urgent manhunt, authorities searching for a hit-and-run driver who killed at least 2 children. How police are asking the public for help. Stay with us. Back now with breaking news. NFL legend John Madden has died at the age of 85. The Hall of Fame coach went on to become a broadcaster who worked for every major network and is also the namesake of the famed Madden video game franchise. The league announcing he died unexpectedly this morning, writing, quote, "He was football." Community reeling tonight after a tragic hit-and-run accident. It left 2 children dead and 4 others injured. Police now searching for the suspect. NBC's Priscilla Thompson with that story.
Tonight, an intense manhunt for the suspect of a hit-and-run that left 2 children dead and 4 others wounded. The South Florida community in mourning after witnessing the horror unfold.
I seen 2 lifeless bodies here and there. Then I seen 4 more.
Bystanders rushed to help after a car plowed into the kids as they waited in front of an apartment building Monday afternoon.
Holding her hand, letting her know, just hear my voice. Don't sleep, just hear my voice.
6-year-old Andrea Fleming and 5-year-old Kylie Jones died at the scene. 4 other children ages 2 to 10 were taken to the hospital, some with critical injuries, according to police.
This is truly a horrific event, and especially so close to the holidays. I can't imagine what these families are going through, and our thoughts and prayers are with them.
Investigators say a bus that had stopped to pick up passengers was merging back into traffic when the driver of a 2009 Honda Accord tried to speed past. The Honda then veered onto the sidewalk.
He went around the bus, and he came onto the curb where the kids was waiting for their father.
Then police say the driver fled. Officers found the car involved in the hit and run today, but are still searching for the man who was behind the wheel.
If you have a Ring camera on your house, please take a look at it and call Crime Stoppers.
Some residents say speeding and reckless driving are a persistent problem in the neighborhood.
This is like a speedway. This is a crazy busy road. People are speeding all the time. Even with this crosswalk they put up, it's really ineffective.
A community desperate for answers as the search for a suspect continues.
And Priscilla joins us now. Priscilla, what else do we know about that suspect?
Not much, Aaron. Police have identified him as a male, but they haven't provided any details or a description of him. Instead, they're asking anyone in the community who may have seen something or who had one of those doorbell cameras that may have captured something to come forward with that information in hopes that it could help lead to an arrest. Aaron?
All right, Priscilla Thompson for us tonight. Priscilla, thank you. And when we come back, the home explosion in Ohio. That blast caught on a home security camera. The concern tonight for other homes in that area. And actor Hugh Jackman testing positive for COVID-19. How it's affecting Broadway's hottest ticket. Back now with the top story news feed, and we begin with a deadly plane crash in a California neighborhood. A home security camera capturing the moment that small plane went down in San Diego County. Authorities say the jet departed from Orange County and was supposed to land in San Diego. All 4 people on board were killed. No one on the ground was hurt. At least one person is hurt after a home exploded in Ohio. A home security camera capturing that blast in Toledo. Authorities believe that home was vacant at the time, but they continue to search the debris. The explosion blowing out windows of nearby homes, sending one person to the hospital. Fire officials say they're looking into a possible gas leak. A car crashed into a COVID-19 testing site in Massachusetts. Authorities say that car hit a cement barrier and then a testing tent in Medford. Only the driver was hurt here. That site had to shut down but was back up and running about an hour later. And Hugh Jackman has tested positive for COVID. The actor making that announcement on social media, saying that he is feeling symptoms that feel like a cold. He's currently starring in the Music Man revival on Broadway. The show announcing all performances will be canceled through Saturday. Jackman set to return to the stage on January 6th. Now to the sex trafficking trial of Ghislaine Maxwell. The judge extending jury deliberations today, citing concerns that the jury could try to reach a verdict before any potential COVID outbreak could strike, which would then jeopardize the whole trial. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joining us now to sort of help us understand what's happening here. Danny, we did hear that the jury requested some office supplies, Post-its, Post-it notes, paper, that kind of thing. They also asked for some transcripts here. What's your read on that, if anything, at this point? Are they just sort of digging in and getting into the nitty-gritty of this?
That's right. They're trying to get their Staples office supplies and getting down and highlighting and marking and drawing notes. They're doing their job. But to those folks who are wondering why so long on this case, something that people haven't really talked about because it's too easy to talk about what an awful person Jeffrey Epstein was. But this was an undertaking by the government where they're prosecuting events that happened in the early 90s. Think about reconstructing what you were doing on a particular day in the early 90s and late 90s and even the early 2000s. The government has its work cut out for it. And for that reason, pretty much the only thing left is really victim testimony. And that can be challenged based on credibility. So not too much of a surprise here that deliberations are dragging on, but this is admittedly quite long.
In particular, Danny, on the point of transcripts, the jury asked for a transcript from Epstein's private pilot, Jeffrey Epstein's private pilot. Do you read anything into that at all?
They may be looking at credibility. Here's the reason that jurors usually ask for these things. They may be disagreeing in the room about what somebody said. Didn't the pilot say this? No, I'm not sure he said that. I think he said this instead. So they go right to the source, get the information, and hopefully resolve whatever disparities they thought there were in the transcript.
The defense has asked the judge to clarify 2 of the jury instructions. There was one about enticing a minor and one about transporting a minor for sex. What's the defense getting at here? Why ask for this sort of a thing, clarification, after the jury has the case?
Because the defense would be concerned about the language of a particular jury instruction. Look, as a defense attorney, the jury instructions often feel like they are slanted towards conviction if they allow for all these different things to amount to enticement. After all, the government has alleged that the enticement amounted to befriending people, taking them shopping. That seems pretty far afield from the actual sexual crime or the sexual touching that was alleged and testified to in court. So the defense is being very vigilant and really jumping on any opportunity they can to answer a question to their satisfaction when the judge sends jury questions answers back to the jury room.
And last thing I'll ask you, Danny, is we're talking about COVID really all day now. COVID has even found its way into this story, with the judge citing a high and escalating risk. And she said she would have the jurors make plans to continue deliberating until a verdict is reached. Can you read anything in between the lines there?
I'm trying to read into it because I got to tell you, I have my own federal criminal trial coming up in a matter of days. And all attorneys are sitting around wondering, what the heck is going to happen tomorrow, the next day, and the day after that? And if your jurors deliberating, you're particularly concerned because it must feel like the world is falling apart around you as COVID cases rise everywhere. And everyone's wondering, what do we do? It's a kind of Allen charge. And an Allen charge is basically when the judge tells the jury when they're deadlocked, go back there and work a little harder. It's generally considered not good for the defense. But I have to imagine in the jury room, they're sitting around thinking, hey, look, I like you folks. I don't want to be around you one more day than I have to because I don't want to get sick. So let's move this along.
All right, NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos for us tonight. Danny, thank you. Turning back now to COVID, with schools about to reopen and COVID cases still rising, some colleges are rethinking their plans for students to return to campus for the next semester. Ali Vitale has that story tonight.
Universities across the country grappling with how and if to return to school.
It's actually really confusing.
Now, a patchwork of protections are being put in place. Booster mandates, delayed campus move-ins, ramped up testing, and pivots back to remote learning. These changes adding to confusion. Last semester, about 50% of students went to colleges with some type of vaccine mandate, but only half of the students surveyed knew their school's COVID safety policies. The number of colleges with COVID safety measures is already rising. UCLA, Duke, and Emory are returning to virtual learning, at least for the start of the semester. The University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign is delaying in-person class for the first week so students can get COVID tests and results before heading into class.
With people dispersing for the holidays, we know that it's more than likely there will be a very high percentage of those students returning with positivity cases. This is a precautionary measure to keep our community safe.
The University of Michigan is holding fast to its planned return to campus with enhanced safety measures. Students there penned an open letter in favor of that, while more than 1,200 students and staff did the opposite, writing their own letter pushing to delay returning to in-person learning.
I'm very deeply worried. It kind of inflicts a certain sort of terror on some members of the community.
Northwestern University freshman Alyssa Eccles is bracing for change.
It's really frustrating to know that we've gotten a taste of what it could be like, and now we have to go back to the lockdown mindset. I understand that it's for our safety. I just wish it could be different.
A sentiment shared by many. Ali Vitale, NBC News, Washington.
We want to turn back to our breaking news tonight. News that the NFL legend John Madden has died at the age of 85 today. NBC News correspondent Peter Alexander is joining us on the phone now. Peter, I know you grew up in the Oakland area where Madden coached the Raiders for many years. Talk a little bit about what he meant to the Bay Area and how big a shadow John Madden cast there.
You know, Aaron, John Madden was big not just to the Bay Area, but he was really just big across the football landscape. The guy had effectively 3 Hall of Fame careers, one as a coach, another in the broadcast booth, famously for years sitting side by side with Pat Summerall. Football fans like myself in the Bay Area and elsewhere just became so familiar to hearing him call the biggest games in the league. And then obviously his name is now synonymous with the popular video games that a whole new generation have been introduced, folks that never even knew John Madden as a coach or really even as a broadcaster. After I learned about the news, I called to even talk to my dad about it, who raised me as a football fan, and just the impact that he had on so many lives was tremendous. He was the youngest one of the youngest coaches in the league. I think the youngest at the time when he got hired as the head coach by the Raiders, just 32 years old. And as you look on the Hall of Fame website right now, to sort of best capture him, they have one of Madden's favorite quotes, one of his famous quotes. He said, "Coaching isn't work. It's more than a job. It's a way of life. No one should go into coaching unless he couldn't live without it. Football is what I am." He said, "I'm not into gardening or any other hobbies. I don't fish or hunt. I'm in football." John Madden was as much a part of football as really any other, coaching name you can think of.
You know, and I think about, you know, you and I are roughly the same age, and I grew up watching him on television, not as a coach, but as a broadcaster, as you said, and obviously with the Madden video games. And you could tell watching him that football was in his blood, that this was not something that was just, that he was doing just as sort of entertainment for us. It was serious business, and he loved it, and he was excited about it for as long as he was a part of it in any way, shape, or form. I am curious, Peter, what do you think about? What memory will sit with you as a fan of John Madden and as a fan of football and as somebody from Oakland?
You know, Aaron, you talk about how excited he was about football. It's not just that he was excited about it. He was good at it. As a coach, his name was effectively just behind the Hallases and the Lambos as one of the coaches, the youngest coaches to reach 100 wins. But as I think about it, honestly, so many of the memories of John Madden are sort of those NFL films videos. They're not black and white films, but they may as well be, because he was so synonymous with the silver and black in Oakland, where he'd be, you know, breathing out on the sidelines and just looking out at his team across the field. Some of the best records. At one point, they won 17 straight, I think, which was one of the best records, successful runs any team had at that time. So I think a lot of folks will remember him for what he did on the sidelines. But frankly, for a generation like ours, I just remember waking up every Sunday as a California kid and turning on the television and just watching John Madden. He was just the iconic voice of football on the weekends, much the same way as Keith Jackson was critical to college football. John Madden was just such a powerful, booming a voice for anybody that loved the game on a Sunday morning.
Absolutely. All right, Peter Alexander on the phone with us tonight. Peter, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now to Top Stories Global Watch, and we begin with the port explosion in Syria. Cell phone videos showing the blast in the country's main commercial port. Syria saying Israeli missiles caused that blast in what would be a second such attack this month. The explosion sparked a massive fire. No casualties reported, though. Israeli officials denying a request for comment. Record-setting snow has buried parts of Japan, multiple cities smashing their highest snowfall totals in a 24-hour period. More than 3,000 customers without power in some areas. That snow also canceling flights and causing some major traffic jams. Nearly 200 passengers snowed in overnight on a local train line. And a 3,500-year-old mummy has been digitally unwrapped. Researchers using X-ray technology and a CT scan to see the skeleton of an Egyptian pharaoh. The 3D imaging revealing that ancient king was about 35 years old at the time of his death and was in generally good health. Researchers say it was the first time they could learn information about a mummy without actually disturbing it. Well, from the mummies there to time capsules, archaeologists revealed the secrets of yet another relic this week. This one, a Confederate time capsule buried in 1887, discovered in Virginia and opened for the first time. NBC's Carrie Sanders takes a look.
Richmond, Virginia, once the capital of the Confederacy. 3 months ago, in a nation newly sensitive to glorifying a Confederate general, the towering Robert E. Lee statue that was completed in 1890 was taken down. Historians delighted when the dismantling appeared to reveal a time capsule. They believed it might hold a possible second photograph of President Abraham Lincoln, taken after he was assassinated. But the box was nothing more than random keepsakes. But yesterday, when teams cut through the granite pedestal, there it was, the real time capsule.
Is everybody ready?
The 36-pound copper box opened by Virginia archaeologists 134 years after it was sealed.
Not too bad. It's not soup.
Inside, Confederate money, bullets, a hand-carved Confederate flag, a Bible, coins, an old newspaper. But no photo of President Abraham Lincoln's corpse.
No photograph. Are you disappointed?
A little bit disappointed, but not surprised. Abraham Lincoln's widow, Mary Todd Lincoln, absolutely forbid any photographs to be taken of her husband while he was lying in state.
What they did find was an 1865 edition of Harper's with a printed etching of a woman grieving over President Lincoln's coffin. President Lincoln shot just 6 days after General Robert E. Lee surrendered. The Civil War over. Slaves were eventually freed, and the fractured nation, once again, the United States of America. Kerry Sanders, NBC News.
And still ahead tonight, the story of two sisters diagnosed with cancer using their story to help others. We'll be right back. Now to the story of two sisters who were diagnosed with cancer despite no family history and no BRCA gene. The diagnoses now driving their mission to raise awareness. NBC News Now anchor Savannah Sellers has their story.
Gathered at their parents' house on Long Island, Michaela, Marguerite, and Morgan are the Ricks sisters.
I think that we're closer now than we were growing up.
Closer now, in part, because of a serious scare.
It wasn't any pain, it was more maybe like discomfort that I wouldn't eat as much as I normally would because I felt like I was already full.
At just 23 years old, Marguerite learned she had stage 1 ovarian cancer.
There was a mass on my ovary. They didn't know if it was cancerous or not. So then when they went in, they said, yes, it is.
6 months after Marguerite completed treatment, older sister Michaela found a lump under her arm. And at 26, she was diagnosed with breast cancer.
So for both of you, you were young and healthy.
Exactly.
How shocking was it?
It was definitely scary, but I think at that point, the fear kind of goes out the window and you have to come up with a game plan.
And when you have your two older sisters going through this, what did it make you think about your own health?
I think anyone's reaction immediately is, I'm next. Whatever does come next, I know that I have two incredible role models to look up to.
Cancer rates have increased by nearly 30% among 15 to 39-year-olds since the 70s.
Is cancer changing or is detection changing?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Dr. Mary Gemignani at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center treated Michaela.
You can be totally healthy and you could have no symptoms and develop something that you weren't expecting.
During the pandemic, the Ricks sisters launched a nonprofit, We Fight Like Girls, to raise money and provide support for young patients.
Cancer is not a young person's disease. Our age group has a completely different set of things that we're worried about. I can speak for myself, for anyone else my age, they would probably put off going to the doctor because work is too hectic.
They've raised over $150,000 for hospitals and cancer research. And while they are now in remission, their work is far from finished.
We continue for those who have lost the fight, who are still fighting, and those who are unaware of the fight that lies ahead.
A fight these sisters won't let anyone take on alone. Savannah Sellers, NBC News, Long Island, New York.
When we come back tonight, the special reunion through song. One family gathering for the first time in years after several hardships. How music helped bring them together once again. Finally tonight, the sound of music going viral. An Illinois family coming together this holiday season for the first time in years through song. But their story is about much more than just classic Christmas carols. For the Otwine family of Edwardsville, Illinois, music runs deep.
In our whole childhood growing up, music was always at family gatherings.
But those gatherings put on hold. In 2018, family members Gary and Brent both died just 4 weeks apart.
So between that grieving and COVID shutdown and Kevin's immune system, we have not been together.
But out of that tragedy, hope. Another family member, Kevin Weiss, had been on the transplant list for 3 years. Brent had offered to give a kidney to Kevin in the past.
When Brent passed away and was able to donate organs, we requested that they check and see if he was a match for Kevin. It was an absolute perfect match. Every marker was a perfect match. Brent wanted him to have that kidney. And I know he's delighted that Kevin has that kidney.
The transplant, a success.
Really has helped a lot with the grieving process because Brent really physically is still with us.
And this year, the family gathering together for the holidays for the first time in years.
And we found ourselves singing, which none of us have really felt like doing for quite some time.
Even with a few voices missing and a few years without practice, the family harmonizing beautifully. Those carols posted on TikTok and going viral, racking up over 12 million views.
It's just a normal thing, and we don't think about it. But when you get 12 million views and people are making comments like, wow, we don't do this at our Christmas parties.
What was once an ordinary family tradition, now an extraordinary moment for us all.
Think when you lift your voices up together, there's something magical created.
Proclaim, Christ is born in Bethlehem.
That universal language of music still bringing people together. Thank you for watching Top Story. I'm Aaron Gilchrist in New York. I'll see you back here tomorrow. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.